We know immigration is a hot topic in the United States, and of course it's a polarizing subject. You might be in favor of it, or you might be against it, but you're unlikely to be neutral. You probably also think that immigration is either an opportunity or it's a threat.
To end chain migration, ending chain migration, and canceling the visa lottery.
President Trump has railed against the immigration family reunification program since 2016, making it a centerpiece of his campaign for president. But now that the First Lady's parents, his in-laws, have used the program to become U.S. citizens, critics are the ones having the field day.
Chain migration is one of the disasters. Chain migration is a disaster. A disaster. A total disaster. We have to end chain migration.
However, dear viewer, in the United States, there's another kind of immigration that isn't talked about very much, but which involves a huge flow of people moving from one territory to another every single year. I'm talking about interstate immigration, the kind of immigration that happens between the states that make up the entire country. This is something that creates winner and loser states.
We have losers. We have losers.
Also, folks, after Donald Trump and the Republican Party's latest fiscal reform, everything indicates that this type of immigration is going to grow. Obviously, as you can imagine, people tend to immigrate to the most prosperous territories. So, here are a few questions that you might now be asking yourselves. What interstate immigration trends are happening in the United States? What does this type of immigration entail? Which states are the winners and which are the losers? Why? And, well, what can we expect in the future? Well, let's have a look at all of that, shall we?
Winners and losers.
Every year, millions of Americans pack up their bags and move to another state. And logically, some states have positive immigration balances every year. That is to say, year after year, more compatriots arrive than leave. And also, of course, the opposite happens. Some states see many residents move to another state every year, many more than the number who arrive. This is because states compete with each other. Of course, each state has its own characteristics, its own regulations, its own taxes, policies, and logically, this makes some states much more prosperous than others. Obviously, people tend to move to more prosperous places, to states where there's more work, there's better living conditions, and where more companies are being established. Well, according to data from the IRS, or Internal Revenue Service, the federal government agency responsible for collecting taxes, between the end of 2015 and the start of 2016, 2.8% of taxpayers had moved to another state. According to this information, and I assure you that the IRS has the best data in the United States, the migration rate, the internal mobility in the United States, is very, and I mean very high compared to other developed countries. Having said this, do you want to know which states have the greatest migratory deficit? That is, the states with the greatest difference between Americans leaving and arriving per year? Well, check this out. Yes, as you can see, New York is in the lead as the least attractive state for Americans to stay in. In net terms, only in 2016, and discounting arrivals, more than 150,000 Americans left. It's followed by other states such as Illinois, New Jersey, and California. And really, could anyone imagine that California, the land of technology, gorgeous beaches, and good weather, would be on this list? Well, there it is. And now the opposite question. What are the states with the greatest migratory surplus of Americans? Well, check this out. Florida, with a positive balance of about 200,000 Americans, has become the big winner. Mind you, this information is from 2016, but if instead of taking the data from the last available year, we looked at a longer period of time, for example since the beginning of the 1990s, the result is practically the same. New York, California, and Illinois lost the most Americans, while Florida, Arizona, and Texas won the most. And hold on a second here, because this is really much more important than you might be thinking. Do you remember the video we made recently about the hidden debt of the different states in America? Well, folks, every time a state loses Americans, it loses a bit of wealth. For example, the almost 200,000 Americans who moved to Florida in net terms in 2016 had an income of more than $17 billion that year. This is an income that from now on will be produced within Florida. Part of this will be saved in the state's financial entities, while another part will be spent in its stores, in its supermarkets, cinemas, restaurants, and its gas stations. And another part that'll be invested in new businesses that will be mainly located within Florida. All of this means more wealth, more work, and more tax revenues for the state. So at this point, you might be beginning to see why this is quite so important. However, having seen all this, the question does remain, well, what variables explain this movement of people? Well, listen up.
The competition.
There are many reasons why people move from one place to another. There's family, work, climate, opportunities, universities, plenty of things. However, if we take all of the data into account, there are a couple of factors that really stand out. One of them is taxes. In 2016, almost 600,000 people moved from the 25 states with the highest taxes to the 25 states with the lowest taxes. In fact, of the 25 states with the highest taxes, no less than 24 had a net emigration. That is, they saw more Americans leaving than arriving. Because, folks, despite what's sometimes said, internal migration isn't motivated by the weather or things like that. While California does suffer from this deficit, a state like New Hampshire, which is small, cold, mountainous, and has a narrow coastline, they've recorded a surplus since the year 2000. And listen up, because Rhode Island, Vermont, and Massachusetts all have much higher taxes, and they lose Americans every year. And yes, New Hampshire is the state with the second lowest taxes in the United States. Coincidence? Oh no. The same happens in the Midwest. While South Dakota generally registers a surplus of immigrants from year to year, its neighboring states, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota, which have higher taxes, have had migration deficits for 5 consecutive years. And then there's Kentucky versus Tennessee, or California versus Nevada, Texas versus Washington. States with higher taxes lose, and states with lower taxes win. What's more, a study done by economists from the Treasury Department estimated that when New Jersey raised its state income tax in 2004 by almost 2.5 points, it caused more than 80 millionaires to change residences every year. That might not seem like much, but the truth is that residents with higher rates, they pay proportionately more taxes. Now hold on a second, because with taxes come regulations, for example, and perhaps especially those that affect housing. See, a combination of high property taxes and several regulations and limitations make living in one particular state much more expensive than living in another. This is what happens in California.
Californians fed up with housing costs and taxes are fleeing state in big numbers.
Folks, renting an apartment in Las Vegas or Phoenix costs on average less than half of the cost of an apartment in Los Angeles or San Francisco. Not much housing and a lot of demands led to incredibly high prices. And of course, this makes moving to another state worth it for many people, even if they'll earn less. So this has been the case so far. And we can say that the effect that all of this has is very important. States with a migration surplus have also been able to grow more, partly because they have more attractive policies for companies, entrepreneurs, and, as we've also seen, workers. But from now on, everything indicates that the effect will be even greater. This is all thanks to Donald Trump and the Republican Party's tax reform. Listen up.
More competition.
This may be one of the best things that Donald Trump has done. The fiscal reform at the end of 2017 not only meant improving taxation for companies, but also boosting competition among the states. Until now, the federal government subsidized part of a state's taxes. This is because they were deductible. But what you paid to the state was deducted from the taxes that you had to pay to the federal government. This is something that worked as an incentive for states to raise taxes. Well, the tax reform has limited the situation so that the number of households that can deduct local and state taxes has dropped from 42 million homes in 2017 to about 17 million in 2018, all while having smaller deduction amounts. This has been the equivalent of an automatic tax increase in the states with higher taxes, because now their taxpayers will have to pay the state tax and practically the entire federal tax in full. For example, according to the calculations of the El Cato Foundation, a taxpayer from the state of New York who in 2017 would have received a rate of 33% on federal income tax and $30,000 on state and local taxes could have decreased federal taxes by $10,000. That is, thanks to his deduction, state and local taxes would have cost $20,000. However, with the new tax reform, they'll now have to pay $30,000 for state and local taxes, which is 33% more, and people really feel that. So now the differences between the states with the highest taxes and the states with the lowest taxes is going to be much greater.
Perhaps if the high-tax states didn't have this federal crutch to prop up their big spending, they might have to cut taxes to stay competitive. Ronald Reagan.
In fact, as the Wall Street Journal recently published, there's a boom in Florida for wealthy buyers who want to purchase real estate and establish their residence there. And you know why? Well, it probably has something to do with the fact that Florida doesn't have a state income tax and that its property taxes are also relatively low. Anyway, do you know what this all means? Well, it means no less than a new era of competition between the states of the USA has begun. From now on, state governments will feel a lot more pressure to manage their budgets well. The good news is that the evidence points to this being good for everyone. Basically, a growing rivalry between states is beginning to develop behind the scenes, a rivalry to be the most desirable and affordable place for US citizens to live. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Also, please do check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, this channel is possible because of Patreon and our patrons on that platform. Please do consider joining them and supporting our mission of providing independent political coverage. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.
Chain migration is one of the disasters. Chain migration is a disaster. A disaster. A total disaster. We have to end chain migration. We have to end